Would like to welcome everybody. Good crowd again. This is the second annual Gender Issues in Sports Symposium. I want you to know that I'm not used to reading from a prompt, but there's a person behind me that told me I better not go too long, so I'm going to make certain I don't go very. Her name is Jacqueline McDowell, by the way. So I want to welcome everybody. First of all, this is, for those of you that are not from Mason, we are in Merton Hall. And this symposium is the invention of our moderator, Jacqueline McDowell. And on behalf of our division and the sport management program, I'd like to thank her for a countless number of hours to put this together. And again, she did a great job last year, and I'm sure this one is going to be even better. I also would like to thank the Division of Sport, Recreation, and Tourism for putting on this event and agreeing to host. And specifically, I want to thank Bob Baker, our division director. Bob, you have to stand up. Bob Baker. And I want to thank his deanship, and his deanship is over here. Mark Ginsberg, that is my other boss, and Mark Ginsberg is the Dean of the College of Education and Human Development. I also want to thank generous support of the Black Women in Sport Foundation, the Women in Gender Studies Center, and the Beck Foundation too. So thank you very much for their support. Okay, my job is to introduce one of our very best students here at George Mason University, who also happens to be an athlete. I think he's a sprinter, long distance runner. Okay, so I've actually had the pleasure of having Jared in one of my classes. He's going to graduate this year. He's a senior in business management with a concentration in human resources. He competes on our men's track and field team, and he's done so for the last 4 years. His events are the shot put, no surprise, the hammer throw, and the weight throw. Jared is also a member of Omega Psi Phi. And without further ado, Jared Lewis.
I emailed the head coach to get an inquiry about competing for the school, and within 20 minutes, Coach Becky reached out to me. My mother and I had initial reserves about being coached by a female coach. Coming from a small town in Delaware, I grew up with male coaches in every sport that I played, so it's a brand new territory for me. Upon my visit to campus, I was completely blown away by her vision of the program and where she thought my personal growth in track and in life could be. My mother was more than willing to trust her with me and my well-being. Coach has been like an extended part of my family. When I was in the hospital this past summer, unfortunately, due to acute kidney failure, she was one of the first people to not only reach out to me, but personally visit me in the emergency room. Many people have reservations about male athletes being coached by females, and to be completely honest with you, I was one of those people as well initially. However, as soon as my coach showed me how she ran her program, I was more than enthusiastic to sign up for it. I'm an advocate for giving women coaches a chance to coach. As long as they're knowledgeable about their sport and have a passion for coaching, why not give them a chance? I've been privileged by being coached of two of the most knowledgeable women in the industry, Coach Hartley and Coach Hyatt, and the results speak for themselves. It is my honor to introduce the panel. Sharana Hyatt. In 2014, Coach Sharana Hyatt was hired as an assistant track coach with the men's and women's programs at George Mason University. She works with sprinters, jumpers, and hurdlers. During the 2016 and 2017 season, Coach Hyatt assisted in both a men's Atlantic 10 indoor championship title and the women's outdoor championship title. Prior to being hired at George Mason University, she coached jumps, sprint, hurdles, and throws at Columbia University, LaSalle University, and at Nightingale Bamford High School in New York. Coach Hyatt is a former track and field athlete and school record holder at multi-events at Sacred Heart University. Victoria's son. Victoria's son is currently the Director of Operations for the George Washington University men's basketball team. She previously worked with the men's basketball programs at Florida State University, Eastern Michigan University, and Cal State Northridge. Victoria is a former award-winning sports writer who has covered numerous sports, including the MLB, NBA, NFL, college basketball, NASCAR, and even bowling. She was also a tennis player and manager for the men's basketball team at Syracuse University. Natalie Randolph. Natalie Randolph is currently the Senior Women's Administrator and Title IX Coordinator for District of Columbia State Athletics Association. Prior to her position as a Title IX Coordinator, Natalie was a science teacher in District of Columbia for 11 years. While teaching, she served as one of the few female head football coaches in the country for Coolidge High School. During her 4-year tenure as head football coach, Coach Randolph was able to lead the team to 2 playoff appearances and 1 championship appearance. Natalie competed as a track and field athlete at the University of Virginia. Kate Dunn. Kate Dunn is an undergraduate student majoring in sports management at George Mason University. She is also an offensive assistant for the men's football team at Georgetown University. Kate has been coaching men's football since 2013, when she started coaching at the youth level for the McLean Youth Football Club. Kate has coached for the Yana Youth Football Club and has been interning with Georgetown University's football team since 2013. She helped coach the Admirals offense in the 2015 USA College Football Bowl in Florida. In 2017, Kate was accepted into the College Football Hall of Fame for being the first woman and youngest person to coach a college football game. I would like to finally introduce today's moderator, Dr. Jacqueline McDowell. Dr. McDowell is an assistant professor of sports management at George Mason University in the School of Recreation, Health, and Tourism. Prior to pursuing her doctorate and becoming a college professor, she taught high school biology, was a head track and field coach, assistant volleyball coach, and freshman basketball coach. Dr. McDowell's research focuses on diversity and inclusion issues in sport, recreation, organizations with the goal of removing barriers to employment and participation. Her emerging research stream investigates the utility of sports in reducing health risks.
You can breathe now. So guys, let's welcome this panel. Isn't this an impressive panel? So you're looking at a group of women that they're in a small group when you talk about women who are coaching men or are in significant leadership positions when it comes to men's sports. And so you have other women such as Becky Hammond, Nancy Lieberman, Catherine Smith, Bernadette Maddox, Stephanie Reddy, and Jennifer Welter, to name a few. So these women are amongst that small group of women that have crossed that gender line to start working in men's sports. I also want to congratulate you on having the honor of being coached by a female. And so I'll start off our discussion tonight, and then I will hand the mic over to the audience so that you guys can kind of grill them a little bit at the end. And so the U.S. sports system, I teach this to my students, it's based on a dated gender system that basically divides all your sports up into sports for males, sports for females. And when you look at this binary system, basically for male sports, it's predominantly men coaching those sports. And then prior to 1972, before we had Title IX, roughly about 90% of the female sports were coached by women. But you've had a lot of men that have started to cross over into the women's game. Pretty much about 57% when we think about college athletics. At the high school, they're not keeping those numbers. But not a lot of women have actually crossed over into the men's game. You're looking at only roughly about, at the college level, 2 to 3.5% of your men's teams at the college level are being coached by a female. And that's kind of why I said when you look at this panel, you're definitely looking at a minority of women who have crossed that line. And so to start our discussion with the first question, why do you think more women are not obtaining jobs in men's sports, you know, as a coach, manager, or a director of operations?
I guess I can go first. Well, I think maybe it's because if you don't see a lot of people that look like you, maybe you don't think you can do it. So as Dr. McDowell mentioned, for example, I'm the director of basketball operations at George Washington University, and I think in Division I men's basketball, I believe there are less than 10 women that hold my position. So maybe it's because young women or girls are not seeing more women or females in these positions, so maybe they're not thinking it's a viable option for them. That might be a reason.
I would agree with that. From the sports perspective, from the coaching perspective, just the apprehension to venture into the male side, to take on being in a leadership role with male athletes. I think maybe it's just, afraid again and not seeing an example put forth before them.
I also think it comes down to participation. Up until recently, girls haven't been as welcome to participate in youth sports, especially football. And playing as a kid instills a lifelong interest in the game, which makes you more likely to pursue a career in it. So I really think that with more girls playing nowadays, we're going to see more women coaching in the future.
I'd agree with that. Sometimes also we tend to have our biases as well. As a woman, I want to empower other women, and sometimes it's just more attractive to be around other women and encourage them, and forget that our males need to learn how to be encouraged and empowered and led by women. And then also agreeing with these other women over here is, I think that we don't see a lot of us there. So it is intimidating to, break a barrier and go where not many other people are as well.
So listening to you guys, you talk about lack of role models, a lot of women not taking the initiative to want to work in men's sports, some of the biases. And let's think about, this was in 2003. So the Atlantic 10 Commissioner, Bernadette McGlade, she stated, the pool is still relatively small. Women are not only not in the men's game, but their numbers are dwindling in the women's side of the game. It's not like there's this great demand and they're just not getting hired. And then even Patrick Nero, who's the former athletics director at George Washington, he basically attributed some of the decline in women's coaching, and basically said it was because of their demands on their time. And then just to throw one more before you guys can respond, because I see the expression. Coach Gino at Connecticut, his response, he just said, it's quite simple. Not as many women want to coach. It's just that most women probably prefer a normal life. So, what are your thoughts on this being a reason why you're not seeing more women, in this case, in men's sports, but also even in women's sports?
That's a pretty inaccurate quote. I don't think wanting a normal life is the main reason there aren't more women coaching. There are women who want to be doctors or CEOs or in other positions who know they're not going to be working 9 to 5, but aren't discouraged and still succeed in those roles.
Yeah, I would definitely disagree with that statement, that quality of life is not a deterrent for women, who want to pursue coaching. I think that a lot of women, again, may not realize that it's possible if you work hard and are persistent and go for what you want to do.
Mm-hmm. And I also think that, yes, I disagree with those statements, but I also think that we need to recruit more women to coach. I mean, I'm not sure, now again, I don't have data to back any of it up, but I'm not sure that we are recruiting and encouraging female athletes at the participation level to coach in the future. I think that, I'm not a man, so I'm not sure what, how people are encouraged on that end, but I know that people, from being an athlete, there's not much conversation when we're on the participation level. Oh, I want to be a coach soon, or you should think about coaching. I'm sure some people are encouraged, but I think we should probably do a better job across the board with recruitment.
And I agree, that seed, and I have you next, that seed, it has to be planted early. Mm-hmm. And when you're planting that seed, it seems like what the panel was saying, it's not just planting that seed to say you're going to coach in women's sports, but also making sure that these young girls know that they can cross that line and actually start looking at the opportunities in men's sports.
I have a little bit more personal experience on the retention rate of female coaches on that end of things. I think that sometimes women just get tired of being discouraged. I had a very close friend and colleague who was a Power 5 Division I thrower, successful in her own right. and an amazing coach. She built people and she built programs, but she ended up leaving after 8 years coaching because she was tired of just getting treated differently because she was a female. So, you know, I see more and more of, at least on the track side, unfortunately, a lot of female coaches leaving not because they want a normal lifestyle, but because they just want to be valued and respected. So I think that there should be, I mean, yes, we should go after young females and encourage them to be coaches, but we do have female coaches here, and there are things that we can do to keep them going and keep them encouraged instead of leaving the sport so early.
I would definitely agree with that. You know, once you're there, it's hard. It's not easy, and you know, there are a lot of things that you're up against and that you have to push through. So, I would agree, more support for the people that are there in order to retain them.
Okay, so you're saying it's hard. So why did you choose to go into men's sports? And kind of picking on Natalie a little bit to start her off. So of course I did some research before this panel, and when Natalie was asked to be the head coach, you know, for the Coolidge High School team, she didn't just say no, she said no way. And then they came back to her second time, and she was like, no way, like I'm not going to do this. And so what eventually changed for you to agree to actually coach? And then for everyone else, just trying to think of, you know, how did you actually get started?
Probably peer pressure, and then is one, of course, you know, as I asked other people, like, oh yeah, you need to do it, it'd be a great idea. And I was like, that's not why I called you. But I think the other part, you know, the reason why I said no was not because it was men and boys. It was because I didn't think I had the experience. I had only, prior to that, I had only been an assistant coach for 2 years. And so I knew that I didn't know both sides of the ball, and I knew that I didn't have anybody else at the moment that would coach with me. And so as people started signing on to support, then I started rethinking it. And in addition to that, the school wanted to emphasize academics in athletics, and that has always been a passion of mine, and supporting student athletes and changing the program to where it would be, you know, less of just the jock factory and more of, no, these kids need to be productive. So that the ability to do that was probably a big reason I changed my mind.
And before we hear from the rest of the panel, I want to point out, when we start thinking about qualifications, there's a lot of research that actually shows when it comes to women, when we see a job announcement, we feel like we have to meet 100% of the criteria before we'll apply for a job, before we think we're good enough to apply for that job. But when it comes to men, a lot of times they can see one thing and then they say, okay, you know, I'm qualified for that. And so a lot of times as women, we end up self-limiting ourselves, whereas men will go ahead and take, you know, be ambitious and go ahead and apply for those positions.
Go ahead.
I wouldn't say I went after a male position. Usually most programs are combined. But I'll be honest, I can't think of choosing a gender. A lot of people ask me, because I coach both men and women, you know, which one do you prefer? And I think I don't have a preference, because I think where, you know, the men are, you know, lighthearted, but at the same time, maybe not as organized. The women are a little bit more on point and keep the practice going. So I like the dynamic of the two, and I'm very blessed to coach both. But I think if I had to choose, I honestly would choose men. They're a lot of fun, not that the women aren't, but they do keep things a little lighthearted, and, you know, as a female, sometimes I get a little, so they, you know, it's a lot of fun. But I will point out, though, unfortunately, and this is not really what we're here to discuss, but from a job security point of view, it's better to coach women because of Title IX and because there is more money And on the women's side, a lot of men's programs are getting cut, unfortunately, due to Title IX. So the safer option is women. But to say, I definitely went after coaching men, no. It was just more so the dynamic of track and field, which, if there are any men out there, it's the only co-ed sport, really, except for swimming. So just putting that out there, it's a little, that's why it attracts men sometimes. But, it's just easy because there are so many combined programs.
No, good point, and I'll just mention that maybe if men's football didn't have 85 scholarships, we wouldn't have a lot of sports getting cut. And so the rest of the panel about how you got started.
Well, I started watching basketball when I was 5 years old. I grew up in LA. I grew up a Lakers fan. And then when I was like 8 years old, 9 years old, I started watching Syracuse, Georgetown, men's basketball on TV. And I guess maybe if women's basketball was on TV, who knows, maybe I would have fell in love with that. But I fell in love with, men's basketball at a very early age. And then I became a sports writer for a long time. And most of my friends in basketball happened to even coach on the men's side. So I got my opportunity when a friend of mine got his first head coaching job and thought that I would be good at the position of director of basketball operations, and gave me a call and said, hey, would you consider changing careers and doing this? And so I guess I've just stayed in it because it's what I'm familiar with and what I know and what I love, just the game itself.
And how did you get started?
I was originally training to play quarterback, but that just wasn't meant to be because I had brain surgery in 2012. So it was really a career change that got me into coaching, and I just love the sport. I love coaching.
That sounds good. And if you think about what a lot of people on the panel are saying, it's making sure that when you think about role models, that your role models are not just men, not just females, but making sure that you look to have a diverse group of role models to help you get into those positions. Because it seems like everyone here, they had someone that kind of helped them and reached out to them, encouraging them to apply for those roles. So we're going to bring Jared in the conversation. So students that take my courses, they know that I'm real big on theory. So if we look at role congruity theory, it suggests a potential for prejudice exists when characteristics of an individual are incongruent with the prototypical image of who should have certain jobs. So when it comes to male sports, the prototypical director of operations, the manager, or the coach is of course a male. So when a female obtains these positions, a lot of times they might actually experience some type of prejudice, resistance, or differential treatment. And so the question to the panel, and then I have a separate one for Jared, is did you face any resistance or differential treatment, from fellow coaches, it could be parents, players, fans, or others? And then Jared, do you feel that your teammates treat Coach Hyatt or Hartley different than the male coaches?
I personally feel that when we walk into the field house, there's a lot of reverence and respect for Coach Hyatt and Coach Becky. Especially with Coach Becky, everyone knows that you don't go in the back of the field house unless you're there for a purpose. If someone's just straggling over there, she'll be the first one to yell at you to get out of there. So there's a lot of respect for both of our coaches, so I'm very happy to have them.
That's good to hear.
Well, simply put, yes. I get it from all different directions. And at the end of the day, I'm there to coach. That's my job. That's what I love doing. So I try not to let it deter me at all. I try to just coach up athletes the best that I can. I build people. And at the end of the day, I'm someone who loves going to classes. I love learning more about my craft, getting better and better at it. And every coaching book that I've read, it's not separated in gender, because people are people and they want to be valued and they want to be respected. So that's how I treat my athletes. Is that how I'm always treated? No, there are some biases. I think when the men won the A10 championship indoors, it's always hard coaching two championships at the same time. That's something that a lot of people don't understand in track and field. You're actually coaching 2 championships at the same time, not 1. So, you know, it's a huge roller coaster. And, you know, the women play second and the men won. And, you know, you're always like, but the women, they need to win too, you know. And I had a coworker who's seen me coach, works in the field house, great person. You know, he comes up to me and he's like, yeah, you know, this weekend was pretty good. And I was like, yeah, you know, it was. And I was just about to say, oh, but the women got second. I'm pretty bummed about that. And he goes, but the women play second, as if I didn't coach the men. And I was kind of like, yeah, they did, thanks. Or, you know, when I bring recruits in, I'll spend an hour with their parents and them, and the parents will go, oh, so you're a student, right? No. Introduce myself as a coach. Oh, you're a GA, right? Nope, full-time assistants. This is actually my 5th year coaching. So it's just taking it with a grain of salt and understanding that progress is progress, even if it's small. Incremental growth is just something that you look forward to, and you just keep chugging along and doing what you love.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, I went through a lot of the initial discrimination. There was like levels. Like, I think the media, it wasn't malicious or anything. It was just kind of ignorant. Like I remember the very first year, like tons of reporters asked me if I was gonna, what's gonna happen when you have to tackle your players, and I was like, no, I don't know any men that tackle their players. Especially, you know, I was like, this is high school, they're minors, like I'm an adult, like liability. Yeah, not happening. And I was like, we definitely don't do it at the NFL level. I mean, coaches would get killed. But so they were more ignorant rather than malicious. I would say the other coaches, obviously football is a male sport, so you know there was a lot of coaches. I don't want to be the first one to lose to her, and you know stuff like that. The parents, I think, would be the next level. I coached in an inner city Title I school. I had mostly moms. I did have some dads. Most of them were fine. When they find out that you love their kid, like, and you're gonna do whatever it takes for them, they're good to go. Some were skeptical. Most of the issues came from the dads that just couldn't handle it, and then they got over it. And then the least problem of all was the kids. I mean, the boys, once they were like, oh yeah, she's, you know, whatever. They did face a little bit of teasing on the bus, and they would tell me, but they were fine with that. And then, you know, one time, one of my players, Dayon, he was one of the top recruits, and he got, you know, they would call, the coaches call your phone and can I speak to Dayon? So I was like, Dayon, come, you know, it's the Michigan State coach, and I was handing him the phone. He took the phone and he covered the receiver. He was like, is it a man or a woman? I was like, Dayon, it's a man, like it's football. It's like, it's Michigan State. He's like, okay. But I mean, it was just so automatic because he wanted to know what to say, sir or ma'am. And so that was nice.
Well, I'm happy to say that in terms of players and other coaches, I haven't encountered any issues or been treated differently, and only been treated with respect and, you know, welcomed, I think, for the most part. But I would say that a lot of times when we're traveling and we're in the airport, people will come up to me and they'll say, oh, are you the trainer? Like the athletic trainer? And I'm like, no. And I just kind of look at them and I just walk away. And then sometimes, you know, before the games, the referees will normally come shake the coaching staff's hands. And for every game, I'm very mindful. I don't wear dresses. I don't wear, you know, skirts. And I do that on purpose just because I'd rather blend in. I'll wear like a full-on pantsuit like the rest of the men. And a lot of times I'm standing next to our head coach. And at one school, I used to rate the referees, unbeknownst to them. Like,
it wasn't until after I asked them if they said that to the guys that they let me work with the team in the weight room. And more recently, I was working with a youth team, and I found out the hard way that some male coaches don't really appreciate it when you show them that they underestimated you, and they will go so far as to exclude you because of it.
And so this is, you're saying the head coaches and assistant coaches excluding you from different activities, or?
The commissioner from the actual league just shut me out.
So definitely when we start thinking about, and that's kind of why I mentioned role congruity theory, because they're not the prototypical, coach or director of operations and so that does cause some of that resistance. Another thing that happens when you're not the prototypical person is you start dealing with stereotypes. And so some stereotypes that have been advanced, listen to these. Male players won't want to play for women. They won't respect them. They won't take orders from them. Women are too soft, too emotional, too fragile. And that even if they played the sport, they can't possibly understand it as well as their male counterparts. And so this is some of the stereotypes that has been found in the research. So how do quotes such as these make you feel, and what do you believe it will take in order to change these perceptions that some people in our society have about women working in men's sports?
I think it just takes more people doing it. I mean, you have to break that stereotype, and it's funny, like a lot of people, oh wow, so you really do know this. I'm like, yep, that coach, we won the game, so yeah. And I think that in addition to the straight on male female difference and the stereotypes of male and female, I also noticed, because I was not the first or only football coach that coached, or woman that coached a male football team. I was not. But I was their stereotypical view of a feminine woman. And so I got a lot of attention. And I think, that's just my theory, and some of the reporters did say that, like, you have a pretty face and you actually look like a girl, and so you're getting a lot of coverage. And I'm like, yeah, it's ridiculous. But that is a stereotype as well. And when people know that I played football, they were like, oh, you don't look like you played football. And I was like, is it because I'm small? And they're like, no. And I'm like, oh, it's because I look femme or whatever. And I'm like, that is definitely something that I faced. But people say that kind of stuff all the time, and we just have to keep going, and eventually they get over it. And when they don't get over it, they get passed on.
In basketball, you mentioned Stephanie Reddy, you mentioned Becky Hammond and Nancy Lieberman-Klein and other, women that have advanced. I think that, again, the more people see it and recognize it to be quote-unquote normal, the less stereotyping there will be. But I think in general in our society, stereotyping is a problem. People automatically judge people based on their appearance, and that happens in everyday life, not just in athletics. If you look at me, I'm a Chinese woman. I'm supposed to be good at math, but I'm terrible at math. I wasn't forced to be a doctor or a lawyer or anything, and I'm thankful for that my parents let me do what I want to do, which is, be a sports writer and work with the men's basketball team. I don't think my mom really gets it. She probably would have preferred that I took a more quote-unquote traditional route, but I think that when we as a society stop putting people in boxes and expecting them to be this or that based on their appearance, we'll be better off in a lot of different ways, not just in athletics.
I think that there are a lot of misconceptions of the view of a woman. I think an advantage for us, and I might be jumping the gun on this, is that people see women as nurturing. We are nurturing. But have you ever seen a lioness be nurturing? Mm-hmm. It's not that soft, is it? It's strong. See, people think soft when it comes to nurturing. I think strong. And it's just a matter of educating people, having those conversations. I have a lot of colleagues that are males that I have great relationships with, and I have open relationships with where they feel comfortable asking me questions. And I had to become approachable. A lot of them said that I had a certain face when I rested, so I had to fix that. And basically what they were telling me was, be approachable so that the door is open so you can educate myth. One of the things that I think I've surprised a lot of my male counterparts is when you look at a female coach, and you wonder how to treat her, know that we don't want to be treated like female coaches. We want to be treated like a coach. That's it. When you shake my hand, shake my hand. Don't give me a limp hand. Give me a strong handshake. Don't break it now. So it's just a matter of also educating people and having those conversations and being okay with people asking those difficult questions. Because when someone asks a question, it's not to offend you. It's to figure out more about you, and you should be very open and welcome towards that.
I would agree with that. I mean, just to add to the being approachable and being open. I mean, when I got the job, I had 3 kids come to me and very politely and say, well, Miss Randolph, I'm not sure I can play for a woman, and this is like strange. And I'm like, that's fine, it is strange. Strange for me, strange for you, that's fine. And they were considering transferring, and I was like, whatever you decide to do is your decision. This is your life. This is your senior year, your junior year. This is your high school experience. I will love you regardless. And you've approached me like a young man, and that's commendable. But if you do decide to stay, I will work my tail off to make sure that you are okay and that you are in the best position possible and a productive young citizen. And so they stayed, and those 3 young men are gonna be on the board of my nonprofit, and I still, I'm very close with them now, and they're really young men now, 25. So but it just goes to show, like, they were gonna leave because I was a woman, and now, like, we are integral parts of each other's lives.
So Jared, what were some of the stereotypes or thoughts that popped in your head when you found out that Coach Hartley was going to coach you?
To be completely honest with you, I've never seen a female throws coach in all of my life until I met Coach Becky. In high school, you'd go around to all the meets, and it'd always be either an old throws coach that used to be on the high school team, or it'd be a distance runner that just learned a little bit about it, and it's like, hey, I'll coach you guys too. I'll coach multiple stuff. So definitely coming here and like seeing Coach Becky on the list, it was kind of surprising. I didn't know like what to think of, because one of mine in my head was men and women sometimes might throw it a little differently. So it was in my head, I was like, maybe she might coach me like a female. I'm not really sure how this is gonna work. So like once I like sat down and talked with her, it was actually kind of like refreshing to like hear how she wanted to run the program, and I'm here now, so.
Okay, as a former track coach, I have to ask, how does a woman throw compared to a male?
See, that's what I was thinking. He said stereotypes.
And so when we start thinking about these stereotypes and some of the things that the panelists said, because of the stereotypes that we have, and we have to first of all realize that sport is a microcosm of society. So what you're seeing going on in sport, that's what's going on in our larger society. And so we're taking those stereotypes and we're applying this to those women when they enter, as I said, these non-prototypical jobs. That's when they're facing things like the exclusion or being invisible, being passed over as someone walks to the mail instead of shaking your hand. When they're dealing with the resistance from, coaches not wanting, to coach, or even from male athletes saying, I don't want to coach. I do not want to be coached by a female. And so another reason that gets advanced deals with playing. So this goes back to 2013, actually. It was Condoleezza Rice. She was selected to the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, and she received a lot of backlash when she was selected. And the former Auburn football coach, Pat Dye, his comment was, to understand football, you got to play with your hand in the dirt. So do you believe that women have to play men's sports to coach them?
Well, first of all, not everybody in football has their hand in the dirt. Only the linemen do. So that was a dumb comment at the start, but I'll let somebody else answer.
You made some really great comments, beginning with that whole idea about women not knowing discrimination until they're in the workplace. And I'll say it's actually harder to coach women as a female coach than men because they're so used to being led by men. I've had a female say to me once, hey, I don't respond well to women. I only like male coaches, but I like you, Coach Hyatt. And I was like, okay. But I know, I kind of go back to the most important job, and that's raising a child. How many single mothers are out there raising those children? And how many NFL players made it to the NFL without a dad in their life? So, that kind of negates that argument, I think, in its own right. And to be honest with you, they do happen to be males, but, a great friend, colleague, and mentor of mine who's arguably one of the best coaches in the country in track and field, coached Olympians, All-Americans, NCAA record holders, USA jumps. He was a physics teacher that coached football. Never participated in track and field in his life. Coach Hartley was a rower at Dartmouth, and she saw the throws and said, I want to learn this, and I want to teach other people how to throw. So these are examples of people who are exceptional in their sport in their own right. And by the way, she actually had someone make it all the way to Eugene in the throws last year to nationals. Never picked up an implement to compete before she started coaching in her life. So these are all examples of people who, quote unquote, never had their hand in the dirt, and they're doing an amazing job coaching these athletes.
And I think there's a double standard as well. Especially in the football world, they always are surprised when I say I actually did play type of football. But they're like, well, women need to play football. And I'm like, there are so many men that are coaching football that have never played a down of football, and nobody questions them at all, and they don't know 3 things, about the sport, and are coaching kids wrong. And definitely, I'm sure you see it in the youth football. Kids coming from youth football, like, who coached you? Who told you that? And nobody questions them. You get commentators, sometimes I put football games on mute because the commentators just say stuff that doesn't make any sense, and nobody questions them because they haven't played. You can look at them. And look, you have not ever played a down of football, but you are up here, behaving as if you are the end-all be-all. So at least in football, there's a double standard. Nobody questions men that coach football having played before. And I took over in my first job as a receivers coach for a coach that never played receiver at all. And the kids knew it, and they welcomed me.
I absolutely agree with that. And I think as a coach, as long as you know the intricacies of the sport and you have enough experience and just overall knowledge, it doesn't matter if you haven't played, as long as you know how to teach.
Yeah. And in college basketball, there are not a lot, but there's at least, a good number of successful college coaches that have never played in college. Roy Williams at North Carolina, he never played varsity college basketball. He was a JV player. Mick Cronin at Cincinnati, I don't believe he ever played college basketball. Buzz Williams, Marquette, Virginia Tech, he never played college basketball. Even Greg Popovich at the Spurs, he never had a successful pro career, but as she mentioned, you can learn the game. There are thousands and thousands of videos, and this is any sport. If you take the time to learn and study and become knowledgeable and prepare, you can teach yourself to do pretty much anything these days with the internet. And learning sports is not learning how to perform an operation. It's not that difficult.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that you mentioned too that's very important that people didn't understand, coaching is teaching. You know, you have to be able to teach. You can be the best football player in the world. You can be Hall of Famer. And if you don't know how to get a point across to a student or a player, you're a horrible coach. And that's one thing, like even with my own staff, I had to kind of teach them, and there was some resentment, but I was like, we have to teach this football. You are yelling at the kids about with words like you're telling them to get the hook to curl, and they don't know what hook and curl means. And so you have to stop and teach them that, and it's just teaching. Coaching is teaching.
Yeah, very, very good point. And so and the key thing that was mentioned is the knowledge, because there is a double standard, as you mentioned, that when it comes to men, there are a lot of males who have not played, you know, some of these sports that they're coaching on the female side, but no one is ever questioning their knowledge. But when it comes to females, because of that double standard, you do have people basically saying, no, you have to play baseball if you're going to coach baseball. You have to play football if you're going to coach football. But let's think, I think I have a few more minutes, right? Because I want to make sure you guys have plenty of time to ask questions. One issue I do want to get at is this locker room issue, because that's definitely something that people talk about. They're like, women don't belong in the locker room. And they use that as an excuse for why women should not coach men's sports. So how do you handle the locker room situation?
Well, right now where I am at Georgetown, it's just not an issue. I'll be in the locker room when the players are dressed, and I'll step out when they're not. It's as simple as that.
It's definitely a non-issue for myself as well. If I have to go to the locker room, I have someone else check and make sure that all the players are dressed before I even, enter the locker room. And when we have meetings, we have them kind of like in our lounge area. So I'm not in there unless, during games, halftime and pregame, we do our pregame talks in the locker room where they're getting dressed. But other than that, I try not to spend, any time in there unless absolutely necessary. But I also have a different perspective about that, because I was a sports writer for almost 15 years, and I've been in every locker room imaginable: NFL, NBA, NHL, Major League Soccer, and usually the professional athletes, they know that there's going to be female reporters coming in, and they'll normally know, either put a towel on or whatever. And when I was first starting out, the baseball locker rooms were the worst. This was a long time ago in the 90s, and certain baseball players, they would like purposely drop their towel to see if you'd react, and I would just turn around, and I'm like, you're making a fool out of yourself, not me. So, you're looking like an idiot, not me. So, so I'm kind of accustomed to being in men's locker rooms, but basically, don't look where you're not supposed to look. Look on the floor, wait till people get dressed, and be respectful of their space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a non-issue for me as well. I mean, I was the head coach, so I had to be in the locker room a lot. I would bang on the door, hey, I'm coming in, and but I mean, it was also the high school level, so they, the kids didn't care. I mean, our showers or nothing didn't work, so they didn't do a whole lot of, total undressing. And then when there are situations like we had some bullying issues, I would place a male coach. I mean, I would tell people, I'm not the only coach. I'm not the only coach. I place a male coach in the locker room at all times. Like, somebody has to be in the locker room in order for the kids to be in there. But I would just bang on the door and say, I'm coming in.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so it's interesting to hear your comments, because that is definitely something that a lot of people use as an excuse for women not to coach. But as you heard from the panel, it's pretty much a non-issue. Like, this is not something that they actively think about, that would be a barrier. So I just want to end with two questions, and then I'll open it up to you guys. We kind of talked about some of the negative aspects, but this is a great career. And definitely when I talk to you guys, everyone's talking about they're excited, they love their job. And so what have been some of the most rewarding and positive aspects of your job?
I think if you guys came early and you saw some of the pictures up there, I had to put one up with one of my male athletes that graduated. I love that. At the end of the day, that's what they're here for. And I recently had a very real conversation with one of my triple jumpers, and I said, I'm sorry, but hop, step, and jump is not your purpose, it's your preparation. use athletics to prepare you to walk within your purpose. And when I see men and women become confident and they get to know who they are and that they're prepared for the real world, they may not know what the future holds for them, but they know that they're ready because they were placed in a very unique environment where they had to have resilience, where they had to get through adversity, and most importantly, in an environment where they have a whole team of people that are there to help them succeed. That is our job. And I don't know of any other environment that people are going to go through where they have that encouragement. So being able to see people come of their own and walk within their purpose and get their diploma because that was their goal, and to see them happy, that's all I need. If you want to look at my accolades, look at my resume. If you want to look at my accomplishments, talk to my athletes and see what their experience is when they're there.
I absolutely agree with that. I think for me at the youth level, one of the best parts about it is not just inspiring a love for the game, but seeing the players grow, not just as players, but as people, and seeing them experience some of the benefits that sport offers, like learning about discipline and teamwork. And then at the higher levels, I think the best part is helping players live up to their potential, and knowing that I had even a small part in that means a lot to me.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, you know, my kids are everything to me. You know, I coached there for 4 years, so 4 classes of young men, and this first class, the ones that were seniors when I got there, all of them, you know, have moved on to do great things, and then 2 have graduated from graduate school, and 1 is back in the school system. It makes me so happy as a college and career counselor, and is also helping out to coach football. And you know, just seeing that and knowing that you are part of it, and you know, and they say thank you. They come back and they say thank you. My house is full on Christmas and Thanksgiving of large young men that used to be small, and that is just, I mean, I think that's my favorite part.
And just adding to what they said, definitely having an impact on, you know, your players' lives is great, and they've eloquently, you know, expanded on those points, but also winning games is fun. Sitting on the bench after a win and going through a handshake line and, you know, watching your team get better from the beginning to the end of the season is fun. It's gratifying and rewarding, and competing or trying to compete for championships is fun. And that's another reason I think most people are involved in sports.
And I agree, as a former high school coach, I definitely agree with all your sentiments. And so, Jared, what advice do you give to males about being coached by a female?
The biggest piece of advice I could probably give is come in with an open mind. I came in with a semi-open mind, and I was completely blown away. And I definitely think if people come in with an open mind originally, they'll even be more like amazed. Coach Becky has taught me many things, and even Coach Hyatt has taught me many things about athletics, running mechanics, throwing, that I've never even thought of before. Things that I probably wouldn't learn, things I've never even heard about in high school, and they've taught me that within 4 years. So I think that's the most impressive thing about that.
And I have snacks in my office.
I forgot to mention snacks. And so for the rest of the panel, what advice would you give to women who want to break those gender roles and coach or be a director of operations in men's sports?
Biases exist, whether it's your race, your gender, your age. That's a fact. But at the end of the day, when you start using it as an excuse, those people win. When you walk within your purpose, there's nothing and no one that can prevent you from doing what you're meant to do and who you're meant to be. Titles, where you land on an org chart, that doesn't matter. You being you and walking within that boldly, That's what matters. Your character, your morals, and your values. Because at the end of the day, the truth always comes out. And if you're doing what you're supposed to do, and you want to help people, and you want to build people, this is a very, very rewarding career. And I couldn't think of doing anything else.
I would just say that because of the biases and stereotypes do exist, that you definitely have to work harder, be smarter, and be better. And that's just the reality of the situation. People are going to look at you and assume you don't know as much as the men, but therefore you have to, whatever, watch more films, study, learn more, because you're always going to have to prove yourself, and it's just part of the deal. And you have to develop a thick skin so it doesn't bother you. And it's more gratifying when you do show that you know your stuff, and then those people can be quiet.
Yeah, agreed. It's hard. It's very hard. It's going to be hard. So just take that as part of the job. And I am fortunate to have two mentors in here. My former track coach, Randy, and Miss Lucille Hester, who's a legend in her own right. And they both, I took things from what they both said. Randy's always saying, show up. If you show up, you're there. And you just put one foot in front of the other until whatever it is over. But you have to show up every day, no matter how hard it gets, no matter how many tears, how much, blood, sweat, and tears, you gotta show up. And then Ms. Hesher is always like, whatever it is, it's okay. It's always okay. If you're here, it's okay. And you just keep on going.
I would also say that, of course, as a woman in sports, there will definitely be people who tell you that you aren't capable of doing what you want to do. But it's important to remember that it's not your responsibility to change their opinion of women in general. That all you can do and all you need to do is work hard and dedicate yourself to your job and try to change their opinion of you. And that being said, there will be times that no matter what you do, you can't change their opinion of you. And in those moments, you have to remember that it's not a failure on your part, it's a failure of them as a person and their character.
Very, very good comment. And so yeah, we're looking at letting your actions sometimes speaking louder than your words, because you're correct. A lot of times you can keep telling people, about different things, kind of like you're talking to a wall. And so you're talking about proving yourself, going in, having an open mind, walking in your purpose. I really like that, thought. Working harder, smarter, and better, but also being aware, of some of the biases and stereotypes. And that's why I asked the panel about some of the things that they're dealing with, because it's important for women who want to walk in their footsteps to not only know the good, but to also know the bad, to also know the ugly, so that they can make an educated decision about whether they want to work in men's sports. And so I want to open it up to you guys. I had a chance to ask my questions, and I'm sure you guys have some pressing questions you'd like to ask the panel. And so is there anybody who'd like to start off?
Nope.
He's ready.
Yeah. Looking at what I've accomplished, looking at my resume and putting that stuff down. Maybe not necessarily leading with it, but knowing what I've accomplished is kind of enough for me. I really don't have to prove that to anyone else, as these women have said. And honestly, getting there, I see a lot of men here. And I love that because, as a male walking into something like this, there's a lot of hoorah, there's a lot of what am I gonna, what's gonna be like, there's gonna be a whole bunch of women in the room, I'm gonna stick out, da-da-da-da. And I want to commend you guys for that, and I want you to remember that you overcame that barrier to walk into the room to get educated so that we can make this better. Now, I want you to take that moment the next time you walk into your job, and I want you to look at your female counterparts and know that the fact that you're looking at them, they went through the same thing that you went through walking into this room. And they go through that sometimes, not just once, but every day. So before you look at a female and judge them based on what they look like instead of their credentials, their character, and their morals, remember this moment, because that's what she had to overcome to look you in the face at work the next day.
And I would agree that, I mean, I know me, I'm not somebody that is boastful. I did all of the media because I wanted to make sure that they didn't make a negative story, which would, make the lives of my kids, awkward and horrible. But, I did often say, oh no, it's because of this person or this person. So I think that's a good point.
I don't want to step on any toes here, but can we give the panel a round of applause, please?
Good evening. I oversee a men's program in Richmond, track and field. I just want to say, first off, as a Mason alumni, thank you for hosting us and for having this. My question is, so you mentioned kind of controlling the narrative in regards to media. We found with recruits, it's best to address the female. I also work at HBCU, the fact that I'm Caucasian, head on through humor. Do you also recommend then addressing it head on in the interviewing process? Because people sometimes, I think, come to an interview with biases as they interview you. Should we handle it the same way going forward as we found to be successful with our athletes, recruits, and parents?
And can you repeat the beginning of that? Because I do apologize, I was focusing on the time, but you're saying addressing the stereotypes in the interviews?
Yes. We've just found with recruiting, I oversee men's team and my lead assistant's also female, that we tend to address it with families and the kind of the biases that athletes may come through our doors with head on through humor. Do you recommend going into the interview process the same way? Or do you think that it's something that you let just show through? What are your thoughts?
I think if it's appropriate, I mean, I had to address it in my interview because it was like the elephant in the room. So I definitely did, and I think people appreciate that you're not coming in here with rose-colored glasses, like, oh, I'm gonna just be great, and like nothing is wrong. Like, no, there is a challenge here, and I'm prepared to overcome that challenge. So I would say yes.
Well, I'm glad that for me, gender never came up, or has not for me personally, in terms of the interviewing process or being hired. So I will defer to someone else.
But within reason, like, I wouldn't say if it's, a situation like basketball has, male, it's pretty obvious that people have played that sport. You don't want to be seen as overly, like, well, because I'm a woman, and it's like, well, nobody asked you that. But so I think there's a fine line. I think you definitely have to read the situation.
And you have to look at how comfortable someone feels in a situation with bringing that up, because if you go into an interview and you are talking about some of the negative biases or stereotypes that you perceive that you're going to have, you have now just changed the tone of that interview from something positive and being optimistic to being very pessimistic in that interview. And so that's definitely the advice I would tell women, is be very careful about bringing in those negative stereotypes and biases when you talk about saying, well, I think I might deal with this and deal with that. You can listen to some of the questions that they have, and then if the door is kind of open, there's certain things you can share, but I definitely would caution women about that.
I wanted to ask, what would you suggest to an interviewer for if they're hiring a female athletic director or a female coach? Because I know there's a lot of bias. Well, probably, I don't really know. I haven't been interviewed for these positions, but I know people have said there's a sense of bias, it's a little more strict for women. So what would you suggest that interviewers say in those terms?
The person, the interviewer?
Yeah, while they're interviewing you, let's say they're interviewing you,
Yeah.
What would you expect them to ask and stuff, or what should they ask, as opposed to trying to differentiate between genders?
I think they just need to be straightforward. I mean, if they feel like gender is an issue, they need to bring it up tactfully, but in most cases, you focus on their qualifications and whether or not they can do that job, regardless of what gender they're coaching. I mean, are they qualified to do the job? I don't think, and in my case, maybe it was appropriate because it was high school, it was kids, and it was a very unusual situation that would bring a lot of media attention to the school. So it would have been irresponsible for them not to see whether or not I was prepared. But in most cases, I don't think they even should worry about it. I mean, is the person qualified?
And usually it doesn't come up for bias issues and lawsuit, covering yourself issues. It doesn't really come up. They may be looking for a certain gender at some points, but for the most part, I don't think it's ever come up in an interview because, I don't know, I'm not really one on legal issues, but I'm pretty sure that's not accepted. Everything has that little asterisk. We are equal opportunity employers, so it doesn't really come up as much as you think.
Hi, good evening. I work with the College Sports Channel on Sirius XM. And so when news broke that Ednisha Curry would be a female assistant, she was hired at the University of Maine. I also did a little bit of background on her experience through the WNBA, and she went through a program through the NBA that supported female coaches, I think getting more so into the system. So I wanted to know if you all feel like you have some sort of responsibility to help other women come through the door, especially in a leadership position. Victoria, possibly, I'm not sure if you're able to hire or anything like that, but in terms of mentorship, finding a mentee who's a woman who has a passion for the sport and may have that analytical sense and that teaching sense to be able to kind of guide them into coaching roles as well.
I would say that I think our responsibility is just to, do as the best that we can to be good examples, and so that one day hopefully this is not an issue and that people are hired based on their ability and qualifications, as she mentioned. And I'm hoping that one day we're not sitting here talking about why aren't there enough women out there, but I definitely think that all of us would be open to advising other young women or women in general if they had questions, and would encourage more women to pursue these opportunities. But again, I'm hopeful that this doesn't come up and that we're not saying there's only 10 of us or 5 of us or whatever. But I think our best course of action is to, again, prove people wrong by being successful, being respected, and doing the best we can. So it is a non-issue.
And I think also not teetering to the point where I just feel obligated to encourage women in coaching, because then I fall into that same stereotype that I'm accusing other people of having. I can mentor men, and I'm more than happy to. So yes, I get excited when I see other female coaches, but also know that that door is open for men as well. I do it with my athletes. Why not other young male coaches as well, so that they also know that, it's okay to be led by a female as a head coach, maybe in the future, or as an AD.
I think I agree with both of those, but I also agree that it is important, especially, I know football more than anything else. I know track too, but I didn't coach as much. But there does need to be recruitment, and I know the NFL does some things, but people are apprehensive, about going into it because of those things. You haven't played, or you don't know as much, or whatever. So I think it is helpful to have those recruiting programs and those mentorship programs for women.
I'm going to apologize in advance. I have a funny feeling this is a very common question that you get asked, but I have to ask it. My curiosity is killing me. Do you feel that there is a pay discrepancy between male and female coaches? And if there is one, is there anything that you are collectively trying to do to address it?
I got paid peanuts. Everybody gets paid peanuts in high school. In high school sports, I actually did see it this year with Title IX data collection, and a lot of my ADs, when they put the data in the data tracker, they were like, oh, and I was like, yeah, why did you do that? Well, this sport is year round, and I'm like, So some of them saw that, and that is on the charter school side. On the public school side, it's a flat rate for a head coach and a flat rate for an assistant coach. So on the high school sense, I think it's less of an issue in public schools, and I don't have access to the private school data.
I'll be honest, I really don't know. It's coaching, peanuts, I guess. But I will say that in looking at it from another point of view, maybe not the way that you think is head coaches get paid more, and most of them happen to be men. Let's change that, I guess. But I don't know of any experience where I've had that or have seen that.
And what the courts, before we have two more questions, what the courts have actually said when they have looked at the pay discrepancy between men and women, especially when we start thinking about basketball, they've actually said that it's two different sports. And here's why they say that, because when they look at men, they think about the media attention that it attracts. They've also talked about some of the pressure that male coaches have compared to female coaches. I understand, I don't agree with everything that they're saying. But they basically, when it went into the legal system, they basically said, no, these are two different sports, so therefore it does warrant two different things, that a male can get paid more than a female coach for women's basketball. And so you're seeing that in a lot of sports. In tennis, you've had a lot of women, when you think about Serena and Venus, who have definitely went out there and advocated for pay equality. But when you start thinking about a lot of your sports, yes, there's a major discrepancy. Okay, let's have our last two questions.
I just wanted to suggest a book for any woman called The Confidence Code. And it's a fairly recent book. It's out in the last couple years. And when I read about Angela Merkel and some of the very high-level women in international politics and how they over-prepare for meetings, they do lots and lots of work, and they're at that level that they just make sure that they do the very best job so that they are well represented. I think that speaks to the issue that women face. They talk about the stats in terms of jobs, that women don't apply for jobs that they don't think that they can do. It really addresses the issues, and I was really interested to learn that they have now the Confidence Code for girls. But I think they really talk about some of the things that we bring as females into the picture, and I really just want to echo this idea that our job is to do the very best job that we can and to hold ourselves with dignity and to go where other women before us have gone and to continue to break through those walls. But I would just recommend that book. I think it's a great read. Okay?
That's great, and it's related to the comment that Professor Kravitz mentioned, where he talked about when you're dealing with men, and he didn't use his expression, but this is what it made me think of, about looking out the window and looking in the mirror. That when it comes to men, a lot of times they will look out the window to look to see who else can they, in a sense, blame for things that are going on. But women, we tend to look in the mirror a lot of times and criticize ourselves. And that reduces that confidence level, you're right. And that affects us when we start applying to these jobs.
And
go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna add, I think that is also true in any demographic that is discriminated against, because just because I'm a woman, I know I have to do that much more, and because I'm black, I know I got that much more. So it's like, when you are in a situation where you're a minority or you're not seen as somebody that can normally succeed in that realm, you do tend to over prepare, and yeah.
So I have a little bit of a two-parter. My first part is, how was your support system around you, and how did it help or hinder your professional development towards your career? And my second part would be, if you could, after your personal life is finished and through, what's the one goal that you wanted to achieve?
In coaching, you mean?
Yes.
Well, I think yes, the support system is very important. I think you have to kind of designate someone or know that there's someone there that you can just be all out and cry and whatever, because without that, it's very difficult. And I think my goal when I was coaching was just to make sure that the boys that I was in charge of grew up to be productive young men, and I think we achieved that, so I was happy.
I think a support system is definitely necessary as a woman in sports, and personally I'm very fortunate to have such a supportive family and such great coaches with me at Georgetown who are so respectful and willing to help me be the best coach I can be.
Are you talking about a professional support system or personal or both? Sorry. Okay. I think that it's important to have people that you trust, that you can, vent to or, share things with. But I'm glad I have most of my friends are male coaches. And again, I'm glad gender doesn't come up. It's not like it exists, but I'm glad that with me it hasn't, in terms of I'm treated normal like everybody else. Normal being not the right word, but I'm treated the same, I think, as anyone else would be. But in terms of like a career goal, like most men or people, I want to coach, be in the NCAA tournament. That's the pinnacle of college basketball. I want to sit on the bench and participate in the NCAA tournament, and that would be my goal.
Support system wise, I'll put out there, I had to seek a support system, so don't just sit there thinking that it's just going to come to you. But in seeking that, I have a very diverse support system of older coaches, younger coaches, male coaches, female coaches, some that coach track and then some that coach other sports. I actually had an amazing conversation with a female coach. She actually just won a national title indoors. And I just said, hey, I just want to pick your brain on something. And the reason why I was able to do that was because she gave me her number after I reached out and congratulated her, and I challenged her. She said, call anytime, and I called. So definitely seek that support system, and a very diverse one, but also a very honest one. Like those male coaches that told me about my face, that when it rests, it looks like something. Like had that honest support system, and I feel blessed to have that. I have a great, I have great colleagues here as well. Some came out to support, and I'm very, very thankful for that. My belief system is something that's very strong, and I have someone here from the Fellowship of Christian Athletes here who's always been a support system for me. So even outside of coaching, people have helped me. My goal, honestly, it's a little bit different. I don't like the way the NCAA is portrayed. I think that the NCAA saved my life as an athlete. It has helped me become the woman that I am, and I think it's getting a lot of negative press. So one of my main goals is to mold 6 assistant coaches to be really great head coaches, so that when they go out to their programs, they influence those athletic departments, and they influence their assistant coaches, and they mold them to be head coaches. Because at the end of the day, we have to look at the bigger picture and how we can make the most impact and have the most influence. And part of that starts with us leading other people. And when you lead people, yes, you're in charge of them, you have authority over them, and you have influence, but also understand that when you lead people, you also show them how to lead others. And that is the prime example of leading by example. So definitely impacting and influencing the NCAA by helping each other and encouraging each other to take those leadership positions would be something that's my main goal.
I think that's a great thought to end on, because that support system, very important. When you think about some of the things the panelists said, the discrimination, we didn't talk about that much, but first of all, I think it's a good thing that our panel did not feel that they faced a lot of discrimination in their pursuit of the current position that they have. But it is out there, it does exist. We also know the exclusion is out there. We know that these women at certain points felt that they were invisible by people bypassing them. But we also know that for them to be in these positions, it's very rewarding. It's something that they love to do. It's something that they're getting great benefit when they start seeing their athletes graduating, and so forth. And I told you, I remember those days when you see those athletes graduating. And so I definitely appreciate, all the information that you've shared with the panel. And so, guys, let's give a round of applause for us. So I would like to thank a few people before we close tonight. I would like to thank the Division of Sport, Recreation, and Tourism, and Professors Craig Esrick and Bob Baker for their support of this symposium. They have been great in supporting this annual symposium. Lindsay Olson, Lindsay Campbell, Tiffany Sandstrom, Donna Fulton, the Sport Management Society, and Precise Communications for their help with the logistics of this event. Also, definitely a big thank you to the Black Women in Sport Foundation, the Women and Gender Studies Center, and the Beck Foundation for sponsoring this event. And so please check out their websites and look for information about their programs and the foundation. And then last, I would also like to thank everyone that took time out of their day to come to this event. You know, I see some faces that came last year, so I really appreciate the support. Change starts with conversation. That's what these discussions are about. It's having a conversation so that we can have change, so that we can see more women cross that gender line and start working in men's sports. So I'll see you next year. We'll discuss a different topic. So different topic, probably same month. And you guys have a good night.